It's great to see a full house. My name is Jeff Ball. I'm scholar in residence at the Steyer-Taylor Center for Energy Policy and Finance here at Stanford, which is a joint initiative of the law and business schools here. We deal with financial and policy mechanisms to scale up cleaner forms of energy. My background, maybe more relevant for purposes of today, is as a journalist, and maybe most relevant is that I spent 5 years in Detroit writing about the auto industry for the Wall Street Journal in the early 2000s, which makes me not nearly as much of an expert as the four gentlemen here, but slightly dangerous. So we're going to have fun, as I mentioned. The motion, could you put the motion up on the screen? The motion we're going to debate here today is resolved: internal combustion engines have no future in California. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes doing a little housekeeping here, setting the stage for this, introducing these gentlemen, outlining the debating process, and explaining to you how we're going to do this, and then we're going to jump in. Let me first just frame the kind of subject here with a couple of statistics. California is the single largest auto market in the United States. Last year, roughly 1.8 million of the 16.5 million cars and light trucks, new ones that were sold in the country, that is about 11%, were sold in California. California also accounts for a dramatically outsized portion of sales in the United States of what you might call green vehicles. 40% of all US sales of plug-in hybrids are in California. A dramatically large percentage of sales of the Toyota Prius are in California. And yet, in the first quarter of this year, slightly more than 98% of all new cars and light trucks sold in California had something pretty familiar under the hood: an internal combustion engine. So that's not designed to sway you either way. That's just a couple of predicate facts for the conversation. Now, here's a little bit about what we're going to do over the next hour. We're going to have what we call an Oxford debate. We have one pair of speakers arguing for the motion here, and one pair of speakers arguing against the motion. We're going to start with opening statements. Each of these four guys is going to give a 3-minute statement. First, we're going to have Mark, whom I'll introduce more fully in a moment, speaking for the resolution that internal combustion engines have no future in California. Then we're going to have John, again, whom I'll introduce in a moment. John, you're going first, is that right? Speak against. And then Drew will rebut Mark. Drew will rebut John, and then Justin will rebut Drew. Yeah? Okay, 3 minutes each. Now, the math whizzes among you will have calculated that that'll take about 12 minutes. Then we're going to have 30 minutes for questions. I'm going to lob some questions, shoot some questions at these guys, and you guys are going to have the opportunity to lob questions. So there are people with microphones, and at one point in a few minutes, I'm going to ask those people, I'm going to ask you if you have a question to raise your hand so that someone can bring a microphone to you, so that at the time when we go to questions, those of you who want to ask them are ready. I would just ask you to ask a question and not deliver a speech. If you deliver a speech, I will cut you off. I'm not that polite. We don't have a lot of time for this, and we want to get through a lot. So please, a succinct question. After that, after the 30 minutes, we'll have 2 minutes from each of these four people for final closing remarks. And now, the most important part, the voting, because this is a debate and there will be a clear winning team and a clear losing team. The threshold for victory here is not getting the most people in this room to agree with you, because you all walk into this room with biases. All of you, I suspect, have a fairly strong view, yay or nay, on this motion. What we're going to test here is how persuasive these guys are. So, in a moment, we're going to take a vote now and see where this audience is split. And then at the end of this debate, we will take another vote, and we'll see who moved the greatest number of people, and that pair will be the winner. Does everyone have that? Okay, good. So, before I ask you to do this initial vote, let me introduce these guys. Arguing for the motion, as I said, for the motion that internal combustion engines have no future in California, are Mark Platshon and Drew Baglino. You can read everyone's bio in the books that you have, so I'm not going to do it completely, but I want to pull out some salient facts. Mark is a venture capitalist. Of specific note for today, Mark is a senior advisor with BMW's iVentures fund, and he's co-founder of a battery company called Amprius, and he was an early inventor in a company that you may have heard of called Tesla. Drew works at Tesla. He wears two hats there. He heads the engineering effort for Tesla's effort to develop batteries that are tied to the electrical grid. These are not the batteries that are in the car. These are batteries, stationary batteries. And he also leads the group at Tesla that optimizes the design and the controls of the powertrain and high voltage systems in Tesla's cars, specifically in Tesla's Model S. How many of you here drive a Model S? I'm astounded. I've never seen a Silicon Valley on. How many people? One person. So you owe Drew a note of thanks at the end of the debate. Okay, so that's Mark and Drew are for the motion. Now, against the motion, we have Justin Ward and John Boesel. John, here, John, raise your hand. John works for CalSTART. CalSTART is, in fact, John is the president and CEO of CalSTART, which is a national group that aims to boost clean transportation technologies. He, in full disclosure, is a member of the advisory board of the entity that's putting on this conference, the Precourt Energy Efficiency Center. And you may wonder why someone who contends that he's out to boost clean transportation technologies is voting against this motion, and we're going to have an interesting hour ahead of us. Justin Ward, last but definitely not least, works at Toyota. Toyota sells more cars in the state of California by a decent long shot than any other automaker. Statistics I looked at were that 22% of cars sold in California last year were Toyotas. Justin is general manager of Toyota's powertrain system control department. He may or may not have gasoline running in his veins, but his first job at Toyota back in 2001 was as part of Toyota's effort to scale up hydrogen-powered fuel cell cars. You don't see a lot of them on the road, but you may have heard about them, and that we will talk about in a moment. Okay, so a quick word on the motion. The motion, again, is this: internal combustion engines have no future in California. You can interpret that motion however you would like. They are going to suggest to you that you should interpret it in a specific way. Let me give you a couple of thoughts about the ambiguities in that motion, which, by the way, I did not write. It does not specify how small or large the share of internal combustion engines needs to be in California to constitute no future. Does it mean just a few percentage points? Does it mean 0 internal combustion engines? You guys decide. It doesn't specify how far from now the future is. Is it a year from now? Is it 50 years from now? You decide. It doesn't specify what internal combustion engines might consume, and on and on and on. So I just want you to kind of keep your mind open in that regard. Now, enough introduction. It's time to vote. Here's the motion again, and no one cannot vote. We're going to have to do an honor system because I can't see everyone. But please do vote. The motion again is internal combustion engines have no future in California. Raise your hand high if you are for the motion, if you believe internal combustion engines have no future in California. Can someone other than me get a kind of sense of the audience too? Because there are kind of bright lights here. All right, just again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. All right, I'm about, okay, good. All right, raise your hand if you're against the motion. That is, if you believe internal combustion engines have a future in California. All right, I think this is the majority. Does everyone agree with me? By a decent bit. So that's the mathematical conclusion, is a decent bit. Okay, now we're going to start. Okay, here we go. Mark, it's all you. Can we reset the clock at 2 minutes to give Mark his full time? 3. I'm sorry, 3. Okay, ready? Mark, internal combustion engines have no future in California. Why?
Hello. Let me start with a true story. Once upon a time, everybody had the gas ones, and the gas ones worked pretty good. Sure, there were people researching electric ones, but they were expensive and they didn't last very long. But the material science guys kept working away on the electric ones while the gas infrastructure continued to be installed. And everything was going along fine, and then there was the aha moment where the electric guys suddenly had one that was good enough. And in 10 years flat, virtually 100% market share flipped over. The infrastructure was ripped out and replaced, and here we are today. What am I talking about? Street lights, electric lights, the incandescent bulb, which replaced in no time flat burning gas in order to get light. A gas light is a heat engine of a sort. It makes about 1% light and 99% heat. It was replaced by an incandescent bulb that made 10% light and 90% heat. And here we are today in the transition where cheaper and better always wins, where an LED is 10% light, 10% heat, and 90% light and better. Better and cheaper always wins. So let me, what was that? That's one point. Let's talk a little bit about the combustion engine. The combustion engine is an amazing device. It's hundreds of jewel beautiful parts spinning at thousands of RPM to contain explosions in real time. And fundamentally burning stuff, as we just saw with lights, is fundamentally dirty and polluting. But you can surround an engine with enormously expensive and complicated other things, turbochargers and catalytic converters and air injection pumps and variable valve timing and all kinds of stuff to sort of make it work better. And when you do that, you also have to create billions of dollars of infrastructure just to do the smog checks on them, not even to just run them. This is just to check that they're still running. On the other hand, what we see if we look at automakers today
5 seconds, Mark.
is they are designing no new platforms that aren't electrified.
Thank you. A quick note that I should have said before, please tweet if you are of that persuasion. And you should tweet to hashtag SVES, Silicon Valley Energy Summit, SVES, hashtag SVES. Thank you. Okay, John, against the motion.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. As Jeff pointed out, this is a bit of a difficult challenge for me. CalSTART has 150 member companies all developing clean transportation technologies. And none of them am I most proud of than Tesla. And do I want to succeed more than Tesla? And this company is really driving change. Having said that, the way this thesis was worded is really poor. And Jeff did not have a hand in it. Did you hear him distance himself right at the beginning? There's a reason. This is a bright guy who wrote for the Wall Street Journal. Listen to him. The internal combustion engine is used in so many applications today, not the passenger car market, where there is a lot of good progress being made, but in ships, in Admiral McGinn ships, for the U.S. Navy, for trains, for buses, for long-haul trucks, for emergency generators, backup generators, for off-road equipment. There is the potential for electric drive technology to come into those applications. And we are working hard to make that happen, but it's going to be a way before that happens. It'll be quite a while. Secondly, CARB, with the zero-emission vehicle mandate, is hoping that we get 15% of new sales in 2025 be zero-emission vehicles. I'm hopeful and I'm confident that that will happen. But that's still 85% of the market will not be electric vehicles. Thirdly, there is still a huge upside with internal combustion engine vehicles, and the better Tesla gets, the better BMW, Mark's firm that he advises with their electric vehicles, the better they get, the better the internal combustion engine will get. We have a huge upside with hybrids. We could see truly optimized engines that could get 150 miles per gallon with hybrids. That's pretty good. Lastly, a lot of innovation occurring with low carbon fuels. You put a truly low carbon fuel particularly from waste material into an internal combustion engine, today you get a better result than you do with an electric vehicle powered from the grid from greenhouse gas perspective. A refuse truck from Waste Management running on landfill gas has almost a 0 greenhouse gas footprint, whereas an electric vehicle has about a third of an internal combustion engine gasoline vehicle emission level. So it's better. So that's the upside. For those 4 reasons, I think this thesis is flawed.
So John told you that he works for an organization of which Tesla is a member. If John loses his job at the end of this hour, please stay and give him a business card when this is all over. Okay, Drew, your game.
Thank you. Yeah, you made some great points there, John. I think a lot of those points are actually making points for us. In particular, you said, hybrids are showing what you can do with an internal combustion engine, but the way I see that is hybrids are showing what you can do with an electric motor. And they're a half step, and maybe a necessary half step, but they're a half step towards the future that we can all envision and should be envisioning. We need to imagine the future we want, not look at all the ways in which the future we want can't happen. And that's what we're trying to do at Tesla, and that's what I'm trying to do every day with not just what we're doing with vehicles, but also with the grid. And it's a virtuous circle between what we're doing on the grid and what we're doing with the vehicles. But stepping aside from that point, I wanted to also say that and Mark sort of made this point, electric vehicles and really the electric motor in general is just better. It's a better product. People like better products. If I could have an iPhone or a flip phone from 10 years ago, I'm gonna want an iPhone. And you can apply the same thing to the electric drive. It provides what people like better than any other type of drive, and that's torque. What you feel when you're accelerating, you feel torque. You don't feel horsepower. You don't feel combustion. You feel torque on the ground, and that's what electric vehicles can do better than anything else. Batteries are flexible. They can be packaged any which way you want, and that allows you to have a better occupant package. People can feel more comfortable in their car. They can fit more luggage into their car. They basically end up with a better car that's quieter, that's faster accelerating, that's definitely more efficient, that's cheaper to operate and cheaper to own and cheaper to maintain. So there's the better product argument. And then there's one other piece that I think we need to think about, which is it's not just the vehicles, and you made this point. What about all the other places where internal combustion engines are being used? So I think a good example of this is the lawnmower. I had to mow the lawn in my house, and I lived in the East Coast, so the lawn wasn't out all year long. And that meant that every spring I had to figure out whether the carburetor had clogged and whether the oil had gummed up and whether the water the gas had filled with water and whether I could even get that lawnmower to start. And then when I had the lawnmower going, I was just inhaling all these fumes and making a ton of noise, and the neighbors couldn't sleep and all this other stuff. That's a really good example of an internal combustion engine that shouldn't exist. Put an electric motor in there, and you have a great experience. You never go and can't start the thing. You never have gas that's going bad that you have to pump out of the thing through a siphon, spilling it into your mouth along the way. So this is what you can do with everything. Everything that has internal combustion engine, you can make this analogy. And that's what I mean by imagine the future you want. If you imagine it, it will come. And we all have to work together, of course, to get there, but I think we can.
Excellent. Let the record reflect that Drew got the first whoop of the debate. Okay, Justin, all yours.
All right, thanks. Well, lots of great points being raised there, and I'll give up the lawnmower example. I mean, that's a legitimate thing, but the reality is there are applications where EV drive just makes the most sense. The lawnmower example is really a good one. It's really perfect. But there are applications where internal combustion engines still offer great value and great opportunity for the consumer, for the user. When we look at the example that John raised using bio-derived gas, that's a great opportunity. Why not use that as an opportunity to offer more mobility in a way that's sustainable and even competitive or even at an advantage compared to even electric drives today? Now, as Jeff mentioned, I work with Toyota. I'm part of our fuel cell development program. I've been doing that since 2001 in preparation for the launch of our Toyota Mirai later this year. So it's kind of hard. Which side of the stage do I sit on? But the reality is when I look at the technologies out there, when I look at what we need as a society, it's choices. What we need to provide the consumer is we need to provide them options to meet their mobility needs. In some cases, it will be an EV. They will be able to meet their driving needs with an EV. Some cases, they're going to need a faster fueling, longer range. Maybe a fuel cell is going to make more sense for them. Other applications, maybe they're going to be a long-haul trucker. They're going to need fast fueling, long distances. A liquid-based combustion engine may be a more suitable solution for them. When we think about combustion engines, don't think about combustion engines as fossil fuel driven devices. They could be driven by fossil fuels, very much indeed, but they could also be driven by bio-derived fuels. Looking at the future, we think giving the consumer the options, whether it's an EV, a fuel cell, a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, those are all technologies that will continue to exist. It's going to provide the consumer, the customer, with the options that they need to provide their mobility needs. And again, looking at also not just personal mobility side, but look at also heavy-duty transport, marine applications, off-road, agriculture. What are we going to do for agricultural products? And also look at charging times. We need to make sure we understand what does charging really mean. In the case of an electric, let's say everyone had an electric car, and they go to Costco to fuel up, because everyone likes to fuel up at Costco today, right? Costco has 20 pumps. If they need a fast fill, maybe they're going to look at a 100 kilowatt dispenser. 100 kilowatts, 20 pumps. What are you talking about now, right? You're talking about megawatts. How is a megawatt going to be transferred or transmitted during the middle of the day when you're shopping at Costco? We need to think about whole solutions that provide the customer with the mobility they need. Some cases it will be EVs, some cases it'll be hydrogen, and some cases it'll be an internal combustion engine.
Excellent. Okay. Hold your applause. Hold your applause. All right, so now we're going to start 30 minutes of fun and games. And those of you who want to ask a question at one point, raise your hand high, and people with microphones will come to the first 4 of you whom they see. If it turns out that we have time for more than 4 people, we'll just kind of go with that, okay? Excellent. All right, so I'm going to start with a couple of questions. So this has been a lot of fun. Let me now try to make it boring. Let me just whip off a couple of statistics about auto sales in California recently. These are sales from the California New Car Dealers Association, and these are sales for the first quarter of 2015. Sales of hybrids, conventional hybrids like the Prius, that is not plug-in hybrids, hybrids that also take gasoline, fell to 5.2% of all vehicles sold, down from 6.3% in the first quarter of 2014. Sales of plug-in hybrids fell to 1.1%, down from 1.6% a year ago. Sales of electric cars did not fall, but they were essentially flat at 1.7% as opposed to 1.6% a year earlier. So what that means is, as I mentioned earlier, that 98.3% of cars and light trucks sold in California in the first quarter of this year had an internal combustion engine under the hood. Despite stratospheric growth in Tesla's sales, despite the Toyota Prius being the number 2 car sold in California. One more point, and that is that over last year, 2014, 2 of the 10 best-selling vehicles in California were pickup trucks, the Ford F-Series and the Chevy Silverado. So, to the for side, how do you square those numbers with the contention that the internal combustion engine has no future in California?
This is 4, okay.
I have one quick response.
Yeah.
Then you can take it. So, as you said, Tesla sales have been growing. And so from our position, we have no concern about people's interest in buying what we're selling. But that's not all EVs that are sold in California. So we have to consider that. I'm buzzing. The other thing is quarter to quarter, you can't really tell. Somebody might be going through a refresh, like they've taken their car off the market, or maybe the Prius is stale right now, no offense, Justin. And they need to change the interior trim.
You can rebut that in a second.
I mean, consumers are fickle,
write that down.
And that's the thing, right? Like they're not always being driven by the propulsion technology in the car. They've got all different reasons for what they're buying, and that of course is why when we look forward, we're saying, well, we need to build more affordable electric vehicles, and that's what we're focusing on.
Okay, so your point is that these statistics I cited are essentially an anomaly.
Yes.
All right, Mark, you want to throw something in really quickly?
Yeah, I think right now where we are is all the automotive companies are making cars. They're in the product market fit testing stage, where you make a little bit and test how it goes. And what they're learning is they're making all the wrong stuff. Short-range vehicles, the batteries aren't quite there yet. But this question asks, long-term, what's the primary motive power of the vehicles we want? And that means the combustion engine that's added in as part of the balance in a plug-in hybrid, where you got a small engine running to charge the batteries, and gradually the batteries get better, the supercaps come out, the fuel cells come out, and the little engine gets smaller and smaller and less and goes away.
Okay, so guys, Drew's point basically is that these are anomalous numbers. Mark's point basically is, to use a really hackneyed automotive metaphor, that you don't look through the windshield and figure out where you're going by looking through the rearview mirror. That we are about to see a massive revolution, and that what's happening now doesn't foretell that. So why are they wrong, either of you guys?
Well, I mean, we sell millions of our stale vehicles that was described.
Conjecture. I wasn't pointing at it.
Just kidding, Drew. The reality is people want a no-compromise solution for their mobility. That's what people expect. So if we tell them, we got this perfect vehicle for you, it's a perfect, but it makes them have a compromise. Oh, it takes all day to fill up. Oh, that's going to be a showstopper for them. Or doesn't provide the range that they need. That's going to be a showstopper for them. That's not going to change. People are going to want their mobility moving forward in time. The key from an automaker perspective is, how do we provide them that mobility in a way that makes sense? How do we provide that mobility in a way that's sustainable, not just on the vehicle side, but as an ecosystem side, the energy production and distribution side? We think when you look at that sustainable approach, ICEs still are going to play a long role. Looking at ARB's own studies, the California Air Resources Board, for those that are not from California, they still show ICE, even in their own models through 2025, and even into 2050, they still show ICEs in their plans.
John?
I think actually what our opponent said was directionally true. I think electric drive technology is really improving, and it's improving at a rapid rate. I mean, the fact that in 2017, both Tesla and GM will have a 200-mile car, $30,000 with incentives, that's real progress. I bought a Nissan Leaf, 4 years ago, 75 miles, and in 2 years now, we're going to go from 75 to 200 miles at the same price point. That is really impressive. Unfortunately, the way this resolution is worded, it's not going to be an overnight success, and there are going to be all these other technologies. But what is going to happen on the electric drive side is really exciting. But we will see many paths to the future, and we will see the internal combustion engine continue to improve as a response.
So I want to ask another question, and that is, you guys mentioned this a little bit, but there have been attempts to scale up alternative powertrains in California and elsewhere over the years. There was an attempt to start cars that burned methanol, internal combustion engines to be sure, but a different sort of fuel. There have been attempts at ethanol. There have been attempts at hydrogen, as Justin well knows, and I don't think I see a lot of hydrogen cars on the road. There is a big attempt at electric cars now, and Drew's company is doing well, but Drew's company is selling a car that sells for $100,000, and a little less. Okay, call it 80. And the numbers are what the numbers are in terms of penetration thus far. On the other hand, we look at places around the world where the cell phone has overtaken wired lines radically quickly. And people who predicted based on the past what would happen would have been wrong. So what I want to ask both of you guys, and I want to start with the against folks first, is what does history tell you about why things have or have not worked? In other words, how do you refute the notion that there can be sleeper technologies that come by and just blow the doors off a society, including California?
start on that.
Well, I would say, you know, being in California and seeing some of the technology revolutions that have started here, that is possible. You know, Dan Arvizu this morning, you know, talked about how it was so hard to predict the future and how the improvements in solar technology, all that could occur. But, you know, right now the internal combustion engine has such a hold in the market. It can provide so much. If you're living out in the San Joaquin Valley and you have to drive great distances every day and you can't charge up your car, it's going to be hard to switch over to an electric vehicle. So that internal combustion engine has done so much and it's got such a foothold, it's going to be hard to take it out. And we're just talking about the passenger car market here. And we work a lot in the truck space and the bus space. I'm very excited, by the way, what I'm seeing in the bus space, led by a former Kleiner Perkins partner now running Proterra, an electric bus company. I think he's got the chance to really revolutionize electric buses and what can happen there. Very exciting. But it's going to be quite a while before we get fully done with the internal.
Okay, and I just want to shift, actually, I want to try to speed this up a little bit because I want to get a bunch of questions in here too. But you guys, so what do you say to California's less than stellar history of trying to rock the automotive world in terms of technologies under the hood? I mean, what leads you to think that this is going to somehow be different and we're going to flip the fleet, you know, now?
This is fundamentally different. The past was about the government trying to push something consumers didn't want that automakers didn't want to make. And correct, that didn't work. We now have a situation where consumers are pulling these. They want performance, they want quiet, they want clean, they want the charging structure to be in place. And since there's no time frame on this, and you know, whether it happens in a 10-year tipping point like I talked about, or a 20-year tipping point like we could imagine, you know, you make a new car generation every 5 to 7 years. The current generation still has ICE in it. The second generation still has plug-in hybrids, still has some ICE, some internal combustion engines in it. By the third or the fourth generation, batteries, supercaps, will have taken it over and it'll be gone.
So I want to, in a minute, we're going to call for the first question from the audience, but I want to just follow up Mark's point with both of you, and that is, electric cars in California are somewhat subsidized, I think, to be polite. There is a $7,500 federal tax credit for people who buy electric cars. It doesn't do much if you're buying a Tesla, but it does more if you're buying a less expensive electric vehicle. And then there's a California tax credit on top of that. What is it, $2,000, $2,500? Yeah. And then there are actually, and maybe many of you work for them, companies that provide their workers with payments in their paychecks if you buy an electric car. And by some calculations, if you amortize those payments over the length of time that people typically keep a car, your expense in buying an electric car is effectively zero. Now, maybe that's not the case. I'm not beating up on Tesla. Mathematically, it may not be the case with a Tesla, but it may be the case with other cars. So my question is that sustainable? Is that level of subsidization sustainable? If it is not sustainable, what does that do to sales? To what extent do sales depend on that? And if that is sustainable, then guys, how can you defend the notion that it's not going to happen? So why don't we start with you guys, one of you guys?
I'll take it. I think you're right. There are government incentives today, and they, you know, the government is frequently meddling with different markets and for good and bad reasons. I think solar is a great example where there was and still is to some extent some government intervention, but the benefits to all of us are unquestionable, and the benefits to ramping that technology are really unquestionable in terms of what solar costs have done. You know, from Tesla's business perspective, we've never really planned in those subsidies. You know, we release all of our margins with and without the CAFE stuff and with and without the tax credits and everything else.
CAFE is corporate average fuel economy, federal fuel economy regulations.
So we're planning our Model 3, you know, ignoring all of that, because you never know what's going to happen in the political landscape. And we think that we don't need it from our vantage point. And our consumers, you know, you're right, there's carpool lanes and there's some other things, but that's just California. We're a global company and people are buying this product all over the world. It's a different regulatory framework in every place, and people want the car for the car. They don't want the car because the government is telling them to buy it. I think there's tons of evidence that shows that. Maybe it's a little bit different with the short-range EVs, and people are really leveraging the company incentives because otherwise it's not a great car. I mean, Tesla's perspective has always been you have to build a long-range EV, and that's what we do, and that's what people want. And I think as battery costs are plummeting, which they are doing, to the point where the upfront cost is parity, no matter how you look at it, with the alternative car you can buy, you don't need any of these subsidies. The market's just going to take off. People are going to buy it because it's a better car and cheaper.
Okay, so you guys are whispering to yourself. Who's going to take this one?
I'll take this one. So from an incentive point of view, the question you had asked is incentives sustainable? And really the answer is no, right? When you have an incentive-based metric to get a vehicle or a product out and it's based on public funds, that is not going to be a sustainable acquisition in the long term. The technology needs to be able to stand on its own and make a profit for the automaker or the company producing whatever the technology.
Yeah.
Now, the reality is that what we've seen is that in the very beginning of launching a new technology, like an EV or a hybrid, the consumer is a little bit reticent, right? They're a little bit concerned. It's new, they're not sure about durability, or they're not sure about performance, and so they need a little push. So in the beginning, incentives are a good tool to help kick off the market and get the technology rolling. But eventually, the technology needs to be able to stand on its own. And the customer, again, needs to be able to pull on that technology.
Okay, good. Thank you, guys. So who has a question in the audience? Who has a microphone with a question? I see this gentleman over here. Again, a question, not a speech.
Sure. Thank you. Walker Kellogg, Inspired Labs, also the board of Sustainable Silicon Valley. I hope this doesn't compromise my position in line for the Powerwall, Drew. But what do you say to the people that argue that the gas-fired turbines that are producing the power are really just moving the internal combustion engine out of the car to the other end of the plug?
So let me just try to define. Thank you for the question. Again, tweet these things, hashtag SVES. Give the folks who planned this conference a little love. Okay, so the question is basically if you're electrifying the fleet and you are shifting cars from filling up at the pump to plugging into the wall, but the stuff that comes out of the wall in California, much of it is produced by burning natural gas, don't you still have an internal combustion engine in your Tesla or with your Tesla?
Sure, it's a great question, and people, all around the world are asking this question, and it's an important one to answer. I think we can look at what's happened in the United States over the last 2 decades to get a sense of what's happening with the grid generally, and that's the way to think about this. Again, we're talking about the future. Imagine the future we want. In the last 15 years, the amount of coal on the grid has gone from 50% to a third, and that right there is telling. And the planned electricity capacity installation, so this is what is planned, permitted, whatever, all around the country, has less than half the carbon intensity of the existing grid. So what does that mean? That means the grid carbon intensity is going down right in front of us, rapidly. And for some of the reasons I mentioned before, just the cost of solar is going below the cost of wholesale coal-fired electricity. And once that's happened, why would you have that anymore? And coal-fired power plants are being retired all over the country because of that.
So your view is that the grid is going to start getting radically less reliant on internal combustion engines to burn natural gas because it's going to shift to renewable sources like fuel and solar and wind and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. And even if it stays where it is today, we've done the life cycle analysis of the Model S, charged all over the country. And in over 98% of the cases, even when you compare it against a Prius, the Model S is better on a carbon per mile basis. And that's we're aware of this. We're worried about it. And we know that the way the grid is trending, it is the future we want. It's the sustainable energy future we want.
And to be clear, your boss, a gentleman named Elon Musk, has put a little bit of money on the proposition that the United States is going to shift towards solar, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You guys want to respond to this?
Well, I think I would just say that it's a really good point, and we are going to see a big increase in the use of renewables, and that's great. But we are seeing major investments in combined cycle natural gas power plants that are highly efficient, much more efficient than the previous versions, much better than coal. And so they will be able to provide power all the time, whether it's sunny or not, whether it's windy or not. That's so they almost can become the backup power. Hopefully over time, even their role gets minimized. But, you know, it is an internal combustion engine. It does have a future, and that's what we're debating.
Do you guys want a fist bump? Fist bump or high five or something? Okay, another question from the audience. Who has a microphone? If you have a microphone, if you don't,
I'm Ron Swenson.
right here.
From,
Is this, yeah. So for me, I mean, the question is energy density, and you just can't beat gasoline, at least not so far. How many electric airplanes have you seen? So with this proposition, I say planes are not going to be replaced anytime soon. The second is, unless I've not seen something, is that a Prius still has the lowest footprint, because I've been thinking, I have a Prius, but I've been looking at getting a hybrid, and it still has the lowest footprint just because so much electricity is produced.
So what's your question?
So how can you get the utilities to change? Because that's what you've got to do to get the lower carbon footprint, is have renewable.
Change in what way?
Renewable energy for charging.
Okay, how can you?
And the utilities move at snail pace.
Well,
Okay, so just to be clear, I guess the relevance of the question to this resolution is, if we're going to get rid of internal combustion engines producing electricity, how does that happen? In 30 seconds.
yeah. This is I mean, it's not the question on the table, but getting I mean, that's what Dan's talk this morning was all about, how the innovations in solar cost reduction, carpet the desert, split water, make hydrogen. There's a ton of technology being rolled out. And yes, these are 40 and 50-year installations, so it's going to take some time. But first we'll whack off the coal stuff, then we'll whack off the natural gas stuff. We'll end up with a renewable grid.
Okay, you guys want to respond to that quickly or no? No? John? Okay. All right, I want to ask you guys a question, and that is, I want to pick on you guys for a minute, and that is that you've made the proposition that the internal combustion engine has a long way to go to get better. That and there are many people who have predicted the demise of the internal combustion engine over the years, and those people, I dare say, have been wrong. But there's been huge improvement in fuel efficiency recently. You can tell me if you think I'm wrong. But defend your notion that there's still a lot of mileage left, that there's still a lot more you can squeeze out of the internal combustion engine, and try to be specific with some numbers about how much better.
So I'm knocking down water over here. So there still remains lots of opportunity. I think late last year, Toyota Central Lab showed what we called the free piston linear generator. So the free piston linear generator is basically, it's a technology where the piston is not connected to a rotating crank. By getting rid of that piece of that rotating crank, you improve efficiency, right? So now you're knocking off friction losses. You're getting 5% here, 6% here, 10% here, efficiency losses. But instead of using that to make propulsion, we use that to generate electricity. What these EV technologies, what these electric drive technologies do is not just provide opportunities for electricity drive, but it also provides us as automakers opportunity to better optimize the combustion process. Now we can optimize that combustion engine. It doesn't need to have a rotating crankshaft or camshaft in it. We can have a specifically designed engine that could be used as like a range extender.
And how much better is the fuel economy, and how much lower are the emissions as a result of that sort of technology?
So the opportunity for there is you can get efficiency numbers that compete with diesel.
So 30% better than gasoline, typically?
Yep, and you can get, by having these free piston engines, you can get rid of your NOx issues because you're using a gas.
Nitrogen oxide,
yeah,
which contributes to smog.
Yep.
Right, okay. So he's saying that there's a lot of mileage left in the internal combustion engine, and this puppy has a long way to go.
Absolutely.
But you got to say that it doesn't.
Actually, I would argue, is Rube Goldberg in the room? Yes, you can attach all kinds of attachments to an internal combustion engine and get its efficiency from 25%, from 20 to 25 to 28 to maybe 30%. We're talking about a heat engine, and the second law of thermodynamics says it can't get much more than that. It's asymptotic. You're going to dump that heat. So, you know, you can knock yourself out, you can try to rescue that puppy, but it's going down.
Well, also, yeah.
I think that's tweetable. Go ahead.
Sounds pretty cool, actually.
Also, we talked about it before. You know, the electric motor and that method of propulsion just generally is cheaper fundamentally. And this is the exact example of what we're talking about. All these technologies are great, but they're more expensive. And that's both true on the engine side of things, but then upstream. If you look at what we're doing with fracking and with shale oil extraction and tar sands, those are more expensive ways to get at the fuel that you burn. You can still do it, and it's happening, but they're more expensive. And so in the long run, it's about better, cheaper. And that's what you get out of the electric pathway. You can get electricity from anything. And for the gentleman who has the Prius, you know, you were saying, oh, is my Prius the lowest carbon footprint? Absolutely not. I mean, you could put solar on your roof and charge your car that way. I mean, obviously you're winning then. So that's what you get. You get independence. You get a sustainable pathway that is actually there when you're looking at EVs. And I've got more to go on biofuels later, but I'll wait.
What does each of you drive? Mark, what do you drive?
I drive a BMW i3.
Wait, I think I know this answer, but go ahead.
I take a shuttle to work. I'm on a shuttle with 50 other individuals, so my footprint per mile is quite low.
What's in your driveway?
I live in the city, and so I don't have a driveway.
So, John,
But my family owns a Model S. We got the 70D. It's the most affordable Model S. And
you probably got a pretty good deal.
And I'm not going to say, but and we love our Model S.
Okay, John, what do you drive?
We own a Nissan Leaf and a Toyota Prius.
So you have one internal combustion engine. Okay, Justin?
Currently I drive a Toyota Prius, and I have my Toyota Mirai lease on order.
And you switch cars pretty often?
When I can.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
The Mirai is the fuel cell powered vehicle for those.
All right. I want to ask one other question, and then we're going to have another question from the audience. And indulge me here because I'm not sure that this is entirely on point, but I think it's an important question to ask. And that is, we're talking here about what California is going to do, but California is not the world. So let's assume that indeed the internal combustion engine does not have a future in California, and that everything that's driven in California runs on something other than internal combustion engine. My question is, does that matter to the planet? Does it matter to the planet in the sense of criteria pollutants? Does it matter to the planet in terms of carbon, given that the radical majority of increase in auto use is happening not in California and not in the United States and not in Europe, but in the developing world in places like China and India. So do we care what happens in California, yes or no? Who wants to take that on quickly, and then we'll have another question from the audience.
Yeah, listen, I feel very privileged to be working in the clean transportation space in California because I do feel like we are helping to set an example and show the rest of the world that this can happen, that we can meet our air quality targets and the climate targets as well. And I've worked in contact with quite a few people in other nations, and they really do look to see what is happening in California. So we are having a big impact. We need to expand it more beyond our borders and to get other states more engaged and help to build the market. And the more that we can partner globally, that would be very helpful. So I'm not sure how it pertains to the resolution, but it's incredibly important what we do here in California. And we're still far away from our targets. We have to keep doing more in pockets like Palo Alto, Marin, Berkeley. We're doing well, but we got to be doing a lot faster, even to hit the 15% ZEV target in 2025. We got to step up.
Okay, so you guys really quickly, and we have 3 minutes left, and I want to get in at least another question, but address John's point and my question, which is that California actually outside certain pockets like Palo Alto is not on track to do this. And number 2, the question is, does it matter to the world if California does it?
As goes California, goes the world. I mean, that is absolutely.
As goes California, so goes China?
Absolutely.
Really? Okay.
I mean, what comes out of CARB ends up in Munich and Stuttgart and Shanghai, because they build powertrains for the world.
I was going to say the same thing. From the amount of recruiters from China that are hitting me up seems like as goes California, goes the world.
Okay.
So,
All right. Another question. Who has a microphone? There should be two other people.
Yeah.
I can't.
My name is
Yeah.
Ron Swenson from a construction family here in the Valley. And by disclosure, I'm working with a group of students at San Jose State called the Spartan Superway, who are designing a transportation system that was automated, elevated, and solar powered. Silicon Valley, Silicon Energy, Silicon Transportation. And my question is, given that Wall Street is trying to convince us that instead of scraping the bottom of the barrel looking for more oil, we are in fact heading for a disaster called peak oil. And when that happens, we are going to have to
What's your
find another
question? I don't
way
hear a
to
question.
get fuel. My question to the people is, where are you going to find your fuel after the oil crunch hits again?
Okay. Are we in an oil shortage? And if
I
we're
didn't
in
say
oil-
now, I said that we are being conned into thinking that the scraping the bottom of the
Okay,
barrel
fair enough.
is in fact more oil. It's not, it's scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Okay, so the contention is here that we are deluding ourselves thinking that we are in an era of plenty, that indeed that's short-termism, and in fact, there is a limit and we're going to hit it. And that's going to kill the internal combustion engine. That's basically the contention. So respond, both of you guys. John, your turn.
Well, you know, a lot of people were talking about peak oil a few years ago, and then the oil and gas industry innovated and came up with fracking. A lot of issues associated with that, but now all of a sudden now we have abundant supply. So it really hard to predict. And I think the same thing as Tesla and the i3 program BMW improves, I think the internal combustion engine folks will also improve. And so that's where it gets really hard to predict.
One of you guys?
Let me just make one comment about the biofuel sort of sustainable rescue program for the.
Do you want to respond to the notion, though, of oil supply first, or no?
We have no shortage of oil. And the real question is, will we, you know, the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones, and the oil age won't run out because we ran out of oil. We don't know if oil will stop being used because it's too expensive or because it's almost worthless.
So just to be clear, your contention that the internal combustion engine is toast is not predicated on an assumption that we're going to run out of stuff
We're
to
doing
fuel
it
an
because
internal
it's a
combustion.
better
Got it.
transportation
All right. Now
system.
you wanted to say quickly something about biofuels.
The argument that we should plant and harvest biofuels in the water problems that we have is patent lunacy. The energy density you get, somebody said energy density you get from a field of biofuel crops is something around the order of 0.1%. We can carpet that same acre with solar and get near 20%.
All right, I'm going to stop you. You can go on in your closing statement if you want. So we are now at the end of our 30 minutes, and we're going to go into closing statements. And I want you to sort of try to gather your thoughts, because in a moment you're going to vote again. Again, you can tweet at hashtag SVES. Which of you guys started, so you guys are going to start. John, you started, so Justin, you go first with a closing statement of 2 minutes. Okay, let's reset the clock to 2 minutes. Anyway, go ahead.
Great. Just to kind of counter that point a little bit. So yeah, of course, if you're going to build a bio-derived crop in a drought area, that's really lunacy. So if you're going to do a bio-derived product or solution, it needs to be done in a way that makes sense. It needs to be a cohesive solution. But let's go back to the point at hand. Internal combustion engines have a future in California. As we've heard today, that there's going to be a continued need for internal combustion engines, whether it's in the light-duty vehicle sector, whether it's in the heavy-duty vehicle sector, off-road transportation, air transportation, or even power generation. We're going to see the internal combustion engine continue to be a key part of what we need as we move forwards towards a sustainable solution. That doesn't mean it's going to be fossil fuel-based. That doesn't equal sustainability. We need to make sure we have appropriate solutions for our energies. But the reality is, when we look at what the customers are going to have, they're going to have EVs. They're going to buy Teslas and Toyotas and other EVs, right? They're also going to buy fuel cell vehicles, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and other technologies. These technologies are what we need to provide the consumer, to make sure they have their mobility needs. And it's not just about light duty. Let's not forget about that. We do have to also consider air travel. What about air travel? What about the boats? How many DC fast chargers are there in the middle of your lake? We have to make sure that we provide solutions that make sense for the customer, and we do it in a way that's sustainable. And I'll give you 20 seconds.
Excellent. Okay. So I just realized, by the way, I violated the principle of the Oxford debate where the against people are starting with so this is going to be the sort of Oxford debate light, apparently. Anyway, you guys, Drew, I guess it's your turn because, Mark, you started.
Okay. Sure. I want to, it's only 2 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Oh, no. Okay.
Now it's 1:58.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I want to sort of take on the alternative modes of transportation argument really quick. So I grew up in Massachusetts. My family had a boat. Oh my goodness, how much better would it have been if my family's boat had been electric? I can't tell you how many problems we had with carburetors, and again, the same thing, we have to pump the gas out every winter and all these different things, and literally we went through like 4 engines. So boats are a perfect example. They're on a lake. They don't move very far around. Maybe they're even on the ocean. They can't go that far at any given time anyway because of, even in an internal combustion engine, because the amount of fuel you required on a boat. So perfect. You can do a supercharger on the lake, and it would be amazing. In fact, I've penciled it out, and I think it's affordable. So I can't wait to make the electric boat. And then when we talk about trucks are a really great example. So Freightliner just released the Super Truck, which uses less than half the gasoline per mile. And do you know why? Because they put an electric motor in there. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I mean, trucks are the same thing. You know, batteries are getting better. They cycle for longer. They cost less. That's exactly what a truck wants. Most truckers go less than 200 miles between stops. They're going from distribution center to distribution center. Man, just put some superchargers in the distribution center and that whole thing is electric. It's cheaper for the trucking company. It's better for the trucker. They don't have to shift 18 times on their way from 0 to 60 miles an hour on the highway. Awesome. And the last thing I wanted to say is this whole range anxiety thing. People are worried about where they're going to go. Tesla has proven with the 450 superchargers we've put around the world that there's no range anxiety anymore. The superchargers are really easy to put down. There's electricity everywhere. We did this cross-country rally, which in the middle of a blizzard, we were still able to go from California to Boston in 70 hours. So that's my closing statement. Imagine the future you want. It'll be here before you know it.
Drew Baglino, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, John Boesel, speaking for against the resolution.
Okay. I think our opponents are making some really good remarks.
But
I really think we're just as Mark said, really just at the beginning of what we're going to see with electric drive. And Justin's firm is one of the real leaders in fuel cell technology that really has a chance to develop. We are seeing some great progress in electric development of heavy-duty electric vehicles with buses, where I think that technology will be proven out first, and then hopefully get to a point where it can be used in trucks. We've worked with Caterpillar to develop a hybrid electric excavator. So we're starting to see hybrid electric powertrains get into the off-road equipment. And this is all really exciting, and California is leading the way in all those segments I just mentioned. I could point to concrete policies and investments by the state that is making all that happen here in the state, and why it's so important that we continue to push ahead. But this will be a somewhat of a gradual process, and there will be a role for the internal combustion engine. And I think there's now that the debate is about how can we get to these greenhouse gas targets. And 70% of the world's vehicles now are in countries that have greenhouse gas regulations. 70% of all vehicles are in countries with greenhouse gas regulations. So this isn't just a California thing anymore, and that's going to drive change. But there's going to be a period of time here where there is a future for the internal combustion engine in California.
Mark, you have the last word.
Better and cheaper always wins. I think we've talked about the relative efficiency of solar, the declining cost curve of solar, the grid becoming more and more renewable. You want to run transportation off the grid as much as you can, and take that greenhouse gas and the smog and the noise out of the environment. I think we have a perfect opportunity here, when we're presented with the opportunity to kind of vote on a motion, on a movement, the opportunity is to express what do we want to see happen, not what would we settle for in a halfway solution. So since they didn't force us to say, oh, you have to do it in 10 years, they gave us the opportunity to overhaul the way we do energy, overhaul the way we do distribution, overhaul the way we do transportation. It's going to mean the electrification movement, the connected car movement, the autonomous car movement, and then what I call the Uberized car movement really changes the intensity of needs, but it puts that much more pressure on having low-cost transportation so that we can have a vibrant economy and without suffering. The goal here isn't to say, oh, my car can't take me where I want to go. We want a world of plenty with plenty of electricity. Thank you.
Okay, hold your applause. Hold your applause. So you can be the judge of whether this resolution is about what you want to happen or whether this resolution is about what you think will happen. You may read the words and make your decision. The resolution is internal combustion engines have no future in California. So we voted before, we're going to vote again. So if you are for the resolution, you believe internal combustion engines have no future in California, raise your hand. So people who are, help me be the referee here. Okay, if you believe,
Ask how many people changed their mind.
yeah, that's a good point. If you believe internal combustion engines, if you are against the motion, internal combustion engines have no future in California, that is, you believe they do have a future in California, raise your hand. Aye. Okay, my eyes tell me that side is more, but Mark's point is right. So I can't really tell who changed. So who changed your mind?
Well, no, you need the.
That's right. So right. So who voted against before and is voting for now? You voted against before. You're voting for now. Raise your hand high. We're going to actually count hands really high, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay. If you voted against before and you are voting for now, is that what we just did? Yes. You're voting, okay, if you voted for before and you're voting against now, raise your hand.
No.
Wait a minute, I'm all confused.
Wait, the people we just had are people who voted for and now are voting against. Yeah?
The other way around.
They voted against or now voting for.
Yeah.
All right, so 18 people for the for side. If you are now voting against and you voted the other way before, raise your hand. If your mind was changed so that you're now voting against, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't think I need, okay, 4. So I think that so that's against. So I think the fours have it.
No, it's the opposite.
Yes, that's right.
Is it the opposite?
Yeah, the first thing.
Persuaded people.
Yeah, the first
was changing against a 4, wasn't it?
Yeah, against the 4 means
Yeah. Wasn't the first changing against a 4?
I have no idea.
Yeah. I gotta go. Yeah. Is that right? Jim, am I right? The 4s have it, no? Yeah. The 4s win. Thank you very much. Give these gentlemen a hand.